Hey guys, how's it going? Today I wanted to continue my series on Amazon S3. We're going to be diving into using the CLI specifically, and it will be just the very fundamentals. Basically, we're going to be creating a bucket, adding things into it, moving files, deleting the bucket, syncing buckets, like just basically working with S3 using the CLI. So one of the nice things about having a CLI is that you can quickly just open up the terminal and then list all your buckets, grab files really quickly, download files really quickly. Generally, it's faster than using the console if you know what you're doing. So yeah, and also another benefit is that because it just works with like a terminal, you could add it into like some form of automation where you could write a script or like a bash script that just uses the CLI and just able to sync files, download files, move files. The point is it can be injected into an automation process. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive right into this lecture. So first things first. To use the AWS CLI, you need to obviously install it. Now in this particular tutorial, I'm not gonna go into like that much detail, but basically you need to have Python, or there's other ways to do it too, but if you have Python, it's really easy. I'll link the installation instructions on the links below so you guys can follow that. Basically, there's a bunch of ways to do it. You could use curl or pip or, but yeah, if you have Python, it's a lot easier. Anyways, after you do that, you need to configure your AWS CLI. I'm not going to go into that much detail on how to configure your AWS console, but essentially all you do is first you need to create a user and an IAM that has like access to S3. I will link videos on like someone that does that or some video that you can follow. But basically you just do AWS configure, and then it like configures you just have to provide them access keys that you get when you create your username and password. And once you do that, then you have access to AWS S3. So that's basically kind of just the introduction and configuration. So moving on, let's go ahead and open up your console as I've done here. Let me just fix this real quick. Now, the thing about the CLI and any CLI, any good CLI, you should be able to kind of help yourself remember. They're like it's, one of the things that like people find really daunting when they first start out is actually using the command line. I mean, it was the same for me. I remember watching my friends who were like getting into programming, and when they're just like like doing ls, like AWS, all these like commands, and they're going really quickly, and I was just like, I have no idea how they memorize all of that. And the thing is, I'm trying to tell you that you don't necessarily have to memorize everything. Most CLI tools come with some form of like documentation or a help. So AWS CLI is no different. So to do this, the number one thing you should remember how to do is find that documentation, right? So first off, to see if you installed it correctly, the AWS CLI, just do AWS version, and then it should show you if you get like something that like basically if you don't see something like this, then you didn't install it properly. The next thing you should do is just try typing AWS, and then this is like kind of like an error message, but one thing you should notice here is the AWS help. So let's go ahead and type in AWS help. And as you can see, now this goes into like kind of a Vim. So now to navigate this, you kind of need to know Vim controls, but basically J to go down, K to go up, and H and L if your window is like small to go left and right. But basically this is almost probably an exact copy of the documentations that you can find online for the AWS CLI. They've done a really good job of just building it in. And as you can see, these are all these like command services that are available. The API Gateway, AppSync, which is really cool by the way, CloudFront, CloudTrail. Basically, these are all of the different services that AWS provides. Now, what we're interested in is S3. So let's quit out of this, and then let's do AWS S3, and then help. Now, as you can see, this is the documentation for the AWS S3, and then it follows a very similar structure. It tells you what it is. You could read about it more. Right here, it shows you like some of the commands that you can do and such. So sync, make bucket, remove bucket, list. Like these are all the things that we're going to cover here in this section. But I just wanted to show you here really quickly on how to find help for yourself. You know, a big part of being an engineer is to be able to find the information that you need quickly and efficiently to be able to do the job that you're trying to accomplish, you know, to solve that problem, right? I highly encourage you guys to mess around with, you know, getting to the help that you, using the help command, to be able to find the information that you want. So now let's go on to the meat of this like particular lecture, which would be to, you know, start creating buckets and adding things into the buckets. Now let's start with like the Amazon help S3 and see the commands for creating a bucket. Now, creating a bucket is actually make bucket, MB right here. So we could do the same thing by saying AWS S3 make bucket help. And then it will tell you kind of the information about this make bucket. You know, description is creates an S3 bucket, and all you need to do is pass it a valid string. So here's like an example. So let's go ahead and you know, follow this example. So it was Amazon S3 make bucket for MB, and then you give it kind of this path. So now this is just saying after this we just have to create the name of the bucket. So let's say solo encoded, you know, test, right? And when you run this should create a bucket. There's a couple ways to test that we actually created it. I mean, obviously this like just prompt says that we made the bucket, but one thing we can do is just do an ls command. AWS S3 ls, and then it will find the bucket that is associated to your user group. Now that is our bucket. Our address is, you know, solo encoded test. That's essentially the address. So that's just like a very simple way to list out the buckets that you have for your particular user. But you could also, once you add items into your bucket, you could actually use that to list all the items in your bucket. So let's go ahead, let's use the copy command to be able to move an item into the S3 bucket. So I already have that previous index.html file. I'll just reuse that. Now when I ls here is the ls of the directory that I'm in locally, not AWS S3. So watch out for that. It could get a little confusing, but it's super simple. You do Amazon S3, basically saying use the AWS CLI, S3 service, and then the command right here. So if you look at the help, we could look at the help afterwards, but basically you have to give it a path to your file. So we'll do index.html file. We're saying copy this file into a target directory essentially. So we'll do S3 and then solo encoded test. Now we'll just put it on the root directory, and as you can see right here, it says it was uploaded, which is great. Here's another thing. So let's talk about that like list command, right? So if we do Amazon S3 ls, and then we target our actually for this you could just name the bucket itself. Now you'll see that that file index.html was pushed into the bucket. So you may wonder, like, so how do you create like a folder structure? You remember Amazon S3 is a flat structure, so there really isn't folders. But like on the console, it will essentially create a folder like structure for you if you give it like a longer path than the root. So let's just go and copy that same file, but instead let's say like dir1, and then here a thing you can do is if you want to change the name of it, you could do like test.html, right? Then this will essentially copy the index.html file and then rename it to test.html in the directory 1 essentially. So we'll go ahead and list it again, and if you look here it says like dir1, right? So to list that dir, you actually have to do something like this. Let's see. So ls sol encoded test /dir1. And then there you go. There's the test.html. So that's essentially the copy command. Now, one thing that I didn't show you here is that it works the opposite way, right? So you may wonder, like, how do I download a file from S3 to my local directory or any computer that you are? Essentially, it's the command function takes two arguments, right? As you saw here, it's the location of the file, and then the location, the target location where you want to put the file. But just imagine doing this in reverse, right? So we could say S3 and then bucket name test, and then we had that index.html file, right? Index.html, and then let's copy it here but name it test.html. So we're just saying copy that file in that S3 bucket and then copy it to our local directory, but we should name it test.html. So now when we list our local directory, we'll have the test.html here as well. So I'm going to clear the screen a little bit because it's getting a little bit. Now there's a few. If you look here on my notes here, I just put a bunch of commands here, but there is a slight difference between like sync. So there's a functionality called sync, which is very similar to copy, but it will take like the entire folder directory and then sync it to your bucket essentially. So we could go ahead and demonstrate that now here. So let's create like a directory, you know, test sync test, and then let's move let's like move the test HTML to the sync test. So let's go check it out, and now it's there, right? So in this directory we could say S3, and then we're going to use the sync command, and we're going to say the current directory that I'm in, which is a sync test directory, and then we're going to go to S3/sol encoded test, and then we'll say sync test. Now this should essentially sync it. Basically right now, because I only have like one file, it'll just upload it, but the nice thing is if there was like multiple files and the true directories was not in sync, this would essentially sync it. So it will actually remove and add. So that's kind of nice, and you could read more about it by using, you know, AWS S3 sync help. And there's so many like additional commands that you can go into. Now, the final thing I want to do before I start deleting these buckets is show you that these actually exist in the console. So let's go to the console now, and I will go to S3. And in the S3, I should have a bucket called sol encoded test. And then there's that directory that we created with the file. And then there is, you know, the sync test, which we just did, and the original index.html. So now what we're going to do next is essentially do some cleanup, delete every items. Now one thing to know is, you know, to remove a bucket, to delete a bucket, you use the RB command. So RB S3 RB, and then you just give it the address to your bucket. So it'll be sol encoded test. The thing is, because there's items in their bucket, this will fail, right? Sorry, so this has to be S3 / right? It says it failed because the bucket is not empty essentially. So we need to go ahead and start deleting our items in their bucket. So let's go ahead and list their bucket. List the items in the bucket. Sorry. So it's Amazon S3 sol encoded test list. And this gives us, oops. So it's list like so. And let's go ahead and delete this like index.html file. So let's do, to remove is rm, right? So AWS S3 Rm, and then we state essentially the path of the file that we're trying to delete. So that's S3
sole encoded test slash index.html, right? So this should remove it. Now it'd be really painful to do all of this manually. One nice thing that we can do is use the recursive flag. And this is where I encourage you to kind of like dive into the documentations to learn about all of these additional attributes and options that you could pass into the command line to make it more powerful and do things that you really want to solve like more difficult problems. So you could do recursive. So here I just named the bucket and then recursive. I think it's 2 dashes. And then it goes and deletes all the items that I have. And now when I go to AWS S3 remove bucket and give it the path of the bucket, coded.test, it should delete the entire bucket. And it says just remove the bucket. Let's go to the console and then refresh this page. And there should be no buckets.
So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed that quick tutorial on S3. I went a little bit fast. I'm trying to make these videos more concise and kind of straight to the point so that I don't waste any of your guys' time. But yeah, in the next video, I'll probably use the SDK, the Amazon S3 or the Amazon SDK to do something very similar to what I've done here. And finally, I'll probably create like a Dropbox clone after that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick video and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.